Greetings, lovers of lore! Thank you for joining me for the second installment of As It Unfolds, the story of Streets of New Capenna. What I'm doing in this series is I'm taking the main story articles and the side story articles, pulling out all of the relevant details that add to the story of New Capenna and laying them out for you. Accompanying that, you will see on the screen a variety of images that are basically the places and people of New Capenna. These images won't automatically tie to what I'm talking about in terms of the lore right away. But once we're done this series and we've gone through the As It Unfolds and have all the details, I will release a video that chronologically tells you the entire story of New Capenna. So let's dive in. We're going to talk first of all about what's going on with the main storyline and Elspeth. Elspeth is currently working in the Mezio. Now, she has been bouncing around from job to job because all of her employers have been repugnant individuals who essentially asked her to do scummy or illegal things. Now, Elspeth is only taking these jobs because she wants to meld in with the population and see if she can kind of overhear information that will confirm to her that this is indeed her home world, right? Because up until this point, she only has a Johnny's assurances that she actually comes from the world that New Capenna is situated on. And that doesn't specifically mean that Elspeth is actually from the city of New Capenna, because New Capenna doesn't stretch over the entirety of the plane that it exists on. So Elspeth may be from some outlying area of New Capenna as opposed to the city proper. But regardless, she's bouncing around to different jobs. At the current moment in the story, she is actually working at a laundry. Now, she doesn't know the name of her boss because she never bothers to find out their names because of all the job bouncing around she does. But in this case, her boss actually happens to be a really good dude. And you have a situation where a number of toughs, specifically from the crime family of the Maestros, show up at the laundry and say, "Pay us what you owe." And the laundry owner says, "Please just give me more time." And of course, the toughs aren't having it. So they start smashing up the shop, right? Now, the owner is basically trying to protect Elspeth and not let them know that she's there. And Elspeth realizes he's actually a good dude. So she's not willing to let a good person get hosed this way. So she comes on out and starts telling the Maestros that they basically need to beat it. And they're just like, "Listen, laundry girl, we don't need your nonsense. Why don't you shut your mouth before you get a taste of our hands too," right? Now, Elspeth obviously ain't having it. So she mouths off some more back to them. And basically a battle ensues where the Maestros are trying to hit Elspeth with different weaponry and spells, and Elspeth is just bolting out of there, right? She's basically realizing that these Maestro toughs do not care about the surrounding population. So she needs to get them off into some kind of side area where the major population isn't in danger. Admittedly, since she's a planeswalker, she should have some kind of spells that would help in this situation, but regardless, we're going to say that maybe she's currently suffering from some PTSD or something. So she runs off into this alley and gets cornered by the toughs, and they're like, "You should have just kept your mouth shut. Now you're gonna pay." And Elspeth noticed that there are some steel pipes laying around. So she picks one of those steel pipes up and just starts laying into the Maestro toughs, just ganking them left, right, and center, and takes them all down. And then the leader of the four toughs is basically like, "Hey, can't we talk about this?" And she's like, "I don't think so," and clanks them on the head, right? Now, she doesn't take them out. She just knocks them unconscious. But then she starts to hear some clapping in the background, like a well done slow clap, right? And that's when Angelo walks out. And if you listen to yesterday's lore, you'll know who that is. He's essentially the right-hand man of the leader of the Maestros. So Angelo comes out and is like, "Wow, you did a really good job at taking those guys down. Obviously, they were sloppy, but still, your skills are respectable." And at this point, Angelo starts to size Elspeth up. It's like, looking at your clothes and everything, I'm not sure what your deal is, but we could use somebody like you in the Maestros. We could pay you a lot of money. And Elspeth is like, No thanks, right? And then Angelo goes, okay, wait, how about Halo, right? Because Halo is the thing that makes everything go round on the world of Capenna, right? It's more valuable than money. It's like magical angel essence, right? So he offers this Halo to Elspeth, which gives her pause, right? She's kind of like, all right, what are you talking about? But she goes, why would I want that Halo? And that's when Angelo goes, wait a minute. You're not from New Capenna. There's nobody in New Capenna who's going to look at Halo and go, why would I want this? It's the most desired thing in the entire city. If you're somebody who actually managed to survive from the Outlands and come in here, you're even more valuable to us. And Elspeth is like, I don't even care. I'm walking away, right? So she starts walking away, but then she abruptly stops because she sees this fountain, and it's a huge statue of two figures. And one of the figures is an angel, but the other is this bent over, hunched, metallic being that nobody on New Capenna would recognize, but Elspeth recognizes it instantly. This is a Phyrexian. It's a statue of angels fighting Phyrexians. So Angelo notices her interest, and he basically is still trying to recruit her. He's like, hey, why don't you join us? We're the maestros. If you join us, where we put our new recruits is in this gorgeous museum with a beautiful view of the land. And if you like statues like this, we actually have those in our museum. And that's when Elspeth turns around and is like, wait a minute, you have more information about what's going on here? And he's like, yeah, let's talk. And so that's where it ends off with Elspeth in the second part of the story. Now, I'm actually going to be encapsulating both the side story from yesterday and the side story from today, because in yesterday's video, we didn't really get into the side story information because I didn't know there was a side story. So to give you the full grasp of all the lore that's going on, the brokers are led by Falco, okay? The brokers are an organization that on the surface to the rest of Capenna come across as meddlesome lawyers, but they actually underneath do have a genuine noble goal. The brokers actually have a doomsday prophecy that guides their organization, right? Now, maybe not every person in the organization knows the doomsday prophecy to particular levels, but the higher ranked people definitely know all about it, and they are actively working to be prepared for this scenario. Essentially, the doomsday scenario is when the halo of New Capenna runs out. It's going to cause anarchy, but will also most likely cause the end of the magic protections that keep New Capenna safe from the rest of the plane. We don't know what's out around the city, but once the halo runs out, then that protection comes down. So the brokers underneath it all actually have the goal of preparing New Capenna for this doomsday situation, whether the people of New Capenna want to be a part of this or not. So you have a scenario where the brokers have an admirable goal, but the way they do things is pretty awful. One of the ways they operate is to try and lock people in New Capenna into contracts. And how they do that is through devious methods. They have magic that they use that will teleport them to people who are in distressed situations, right? So you'll have somebody who's in danger and there'll just be a puff of light and all of a sudden a broker will show up with a contract in their hand saying, I see you're in trouble. I can make this all go away. All you have to do is sign this paper. And in most cases, what people are signing is an agreement to do a favor, mob style. You know, it's like, I did a favor for you. I scratched your back. You scratch mine. But the thing is, part of the contract, most of the time, actually removes the memory of the contract as well. So these people won't be aware that they basically owe the brokers a favor, but they will basically be activated, almost like sleeper agents, right? So the brokers have tons and tons of people bound to contracts, the majority of which who aren't even aware of it. And they are massively harsh on contract breakers. For example, Falco will take people up to the top of his penthouse and basically whip them off the balcony to plummet to their demise if they have broken a contract, right? And so we find in this side story, we have a character by the name of Perry. Now he's an enforcer for the broker, so he goes out and basically deals with people who have broken contracts. But Perry's sent out to go and deal with a kid. He's just a small little kid who works at a newsstand. And this newsstand kid was cajoled into signing a contract with the breakers because his newsstand was basically across from a very important Obscura location that they wanted to keep tabs on. This kid breaks the contract and Perry is sent to destroy him. Perry refuses to destroy the kid because underneath, Perry's actually a good guy. He believes in what they're doing. He believes in doing a good job for the brokers, but he has morals that he's not willing to break. So Falco is furious with him, right? He calls him up to his penthouse or whatever in front of everybody, takes him up out on the balcony, starts playing head games with him, makes Perry think that he's going to whip him off the balcony, and then sends Perry through all these different kind of tests and whatnot. But ultimately, the whole point of it was Falco was actually grooming Perry for a very specific goal. Perry is meant to be Falco's conscience, which is a really cool concept. You have the idea of the head of the brokers who's in charge of making sure that the brokers and New Capenna is prepared for doomsday. And he's got this temper and he'll end contract breakers like it's nothing. But ultimately underneath it all, he understands that there's something about him that's lacking and you need somebody who's able to give a proper perspective so that in an attempt to save New Capenna, you don't end up just destroying more than you should or bringing everything to ruin. And I thought that was actually a really cool concept. I genuinely didn't expect to have the head of the brokers be grooming his own conscience. I really like the way that the brokers' magic works. They call like invading people's minds depositions and stuff. They use legal terminology, but they have magical concepts that go along with it. And it works great because every broker is considered a solicitor, right? So we've got the brokers out there setting all these contracts, trying to get ready for the doomsday. We also have a side story that delves into the Obscura. Now the Obscura lord over a bunch of seers and kind of hidden information. They're led by a Sphinx who's really into knowing everything that they can and wants to know absolute facts. Not rumors, not hints of things, but solid facts. So one day, out of the blue, all of the Obscura seers, we're talking everybody who's capable of divination that's under the Obscura's thumb, from the smallest little fortune teller on the side to the highest ranking members, they all get blasted with this vision at the same time. Every single one. They start to have visions of a kitten hiding cream and crows flitting and pecking and gold in the water. And that's what they're all chanting. And this actually gets confirmed by cross-referencing through all these different prognosticators. All this sort of thing comes together to say, yes, this is across the board. So the Sphinx that is in charge of the Obscura is actually really freaked out. Doesn't want to mention it because normally this Sphinx gets the same visions that everybody else does. But for some reason, Rafine, the leader of the Obscura, has been left out of this vision, which makes Rafine think that the vision may not actually be real. Because remember what I said, leader wants to have absolute facts. So basically, there is an investigation that starts to happen as a result of this. The vision, the concept of the cat hiding the cream, actually leads to an investigative reporter by the name of Lacey. Lacey is a fluff piece writer, so she writes news that isn't really that big a deal, right? But somehow she's all tangled up in this and she's doing something. So they figure that maybe what's going on is Lacey is setting up a scenario where she wants to break a big story about what's going on. And so basically, maybe Lacey set it up so that all these seers would get blasted with visions, and then she could have the inside scoop and report on it to kind of launch her reporter career, right? So they send a team out, basically Camille and Quasar, which as far as I understand is a merfolk and cephalid combo. They head out to go ahead and investigate this. A number of interesting things happen. One is Quasar actually gets crushed under a building, but because she's a cephalid and she doesn't have any bones, she can just kind of squirm out of a hole in the rubble and survive. That was a neat little moment. But anyways, Camille and Quasar, they end up finding Lacey the reporter, but here's the problem. Her mind's been wiped. So they start to investigate further, and they find like everything she had with her. Her notebooks, these scrolls, anything that was on her that had writing on it, it's all been wiped blank. Her mind's been wiped blank, so they can't extract any information from her whatsoever. They kind of look at the pieces and talk to some other individuals, and through their information network, they're able to learn that something happened to a warehouse. A warehouse blew up. And then they dug even deeper, and it turns out that it wasn't an abandoned warehouse that blew up. It was actually a warehouse that people had just started using in the last week, and it imploded. So they send the investigators into where the warehouse was located, and they can read magical residues. And by doing so, they were able to confirm that Lacey was there and that she showed up with a full bottle of Halo. There was a group of people there, and they focused some kind of power into the bottle of Halo. And as a result, the entire building basically pulled in upon itself at the exact same time that all of these visions were flashed out to seers across the city, right? So you have this crazy scenario where Lacey's mind is wiped. That was their lead. The warehouse has been blown out, and they're just sitting there going, okay, what do we do? So they keep kind of following the clues until Camille basically sorts out that it has to have been the brokers, and that basically Lacey was forced into a contract with the brokers, right? So this leads ultimately to Camille and Quasar finding deep down in like the bowels of the organization of the brokers. I mean, this is a high-ranking individual, but either way, they find this high-ranking individual who's part of the brokers organization, and they have this giant fish tank where they put like silvered and golden statues of contract breakers in. So you've got this incredibly powerful lady who actually is the crow that was shown in the vision, right? She's known as Lagrella the Magpie. So she's the one responsible for what's happened here. She's the one who made this all happen. And Camille is able to ferret it out and basically goes and confronts Lagrella. But the problem is when he does that, or I should say when she does that, because Camille is a lady. When she does that, Lagrella actually turns around and ensnares Camille in broker magic and literally is going to physically force her to sign a contract giving she's going to force her to sign a contract that says you have to give me all the information about your organization that you've gathered, or this contract basically means your life will end, and I'll have you basically turned into a silver statue and tossed into my fish tank. So what happens, through a clever quirk, Quasar, who had been taught by Camille that you can actually disrupt broker magic if you have a mirror. Mirrors will help you see the hidden flaws and loopholes that exist within brokers' contracts, right? I really like that as a loophole for magic. So what happens is they actually reverse the contract and the magic around to force Lagrella into signing the contract. And basically, if she signs the contract, she is absolutely done for. And the whole reason they're doing this is by getting Lagrella in this situation, they're able to force her to cancel the contract, to nullify the contract that she had made with Lacey. And as a result, that would restore all of Lacey's knowledge, all the things that have been wiped away as part of that magical setup, right? So they basically get Lagrella to undo that contract, and then they leave her there bound up in her own magic, which is pretty epic, right? And then that part of the story ends off with basically the revelation that Halo is back in production. The Cabretti family is manufacturing Halo, and that means there has to be at least one angel on New Capenna. Now the question is, do angels manufacture this stuff, or is it manufactured out of angels, right? And then the only other story element that we really have to talk about is the adversary, which, you know what, my apologies. This is actually part of the main story. I just put it in my notes in a different area. But we find out, yesterday we were talking about the adversary. This is somebody who's been leeching members from multiple organizations. We find out that the adversary is Ob Nixilis. He plans to crash the grand yearly celebration that happens that the Cabreri are holding. And ultimately, Ob-Nixilus's plan is to take over the entire plane that New Capenna rests on. So I imagine that from his perspective, New Capenna is the linchpin that you will use to take over all of the plane. So we have a ton of lore meat to chew on, and I will just cover a theory that some of you have brought up because I don't think it's going to happen. There are some of you saying that New Capenna is set in Sarah's realm, but Sarah's realm completely collapsed during the time stream storyline. Like, there's literally no part of Sarah's realm left, so unless Wizards heavily retcons the storyline, it's not possible for Sarah's realm to be where New Capenna is located. And also, New Capenna had a bunch of Phyrexians living in it, and there was only ever one Phyrexian in Sarah's realm. So I figured I'd toss that out there just because enough of you brought that up. Sorry to crush your dreams, my friends, but I don't think that theory is one that's going to work out. But share all your ideas with me in the comments because I genuinely love getting hyped about lore. Thanks for coming by. Let me know what you think about this As It Unfolds lore series, because I really like this idea. The idea of breaking down the bits of story as we get, and then we'll do a chronological wrap up at the end to get maximum loreage. Anyways, thanks for coming by, my friends. If you love what I'm doing here, support me on Patreon. And remember, lore is life.